Well, let's call to order then. I guess roll call, please.
I have Vice Chair Evers,
I'm present.
Commissioner Drystad,
Present.
Commissioner Scott, Commissioner Schmidt, and Commissioner Matthews.
Present. We have approval of the agenda. We have meeting minutes first and then swearing in Jocelyn. And then general business. So I think that's an okay order to go into. So maybe.
Yeah, I move that we move the swearing in of Jocelyn to the very first thing.
Okay.
So that then we have an official.
I'll second that. Okay. Do we know if we need to vote on agenda changes? No, it's pretty.
Technically you do.
Yeah, all right, let's vote on it then. You guys know how to do the voting thing, your little toggle switches to your right.
Which one's two is yes?
You can change your
No,
vote.
green is to the right, and red is to the left. So.
What's on right there?
Well,
there we
there,
go.
There you
there we go. There's a great reveal button, so we don't influence each other's. Okay, I think that was unanimous of the voting members present. Um,
6:10. Perfect, that's fine.
And we will swear in Jocelyn, is it Longhauser? Sankhauser, thank you for.
Okay, so I'll help you with that. And I have a sheet of them. Okay.
You're
Follow along.
That's during that, the flag.
If you can raise your right hand and just repeat after me. I, Jocelyn Fankhauser,
I, Jocelyn Fankhauser,
do swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
do swear that I support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Colorado,
Constitution of the State of Colorado,
and the Town of Lyons Municipal Code,
and the Town of Lyons Municipal Code,
and faithfully perform the duties of the office
and faithfully perform the duties of the office
of Planning and Community Development Commission,
of Planning and Community Development Commission,
upon which I'm about to enter.
upon which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations.
Yay,
welcome aboard.
And you've been in Lions a long time, right?
30 years.
30 years, that qualifies as a long
Long time.
time. Your name is familiar, but I have not yet met you, so this is great. Well, thanks for doing it. Sometimes we offer a space for new members to let us know anything about your past or your current that might help us either know how to work with you or just anything you think is relevant for the commission, kind of just to get to know you better. And maybe you guys all know Jocelyn, but me, I'm not sure.
Only by name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, we work together quite often during and after the flood. You know, Jocelyn was a high person in the county and took care of a lot of things, and helped the town a lot during that time.
Thanks. Yeah, so I I used to live out on Blue Mountain Trail, so out of the town limits for half my time in Lyons, but now I'm on Cobblestone Court, so over by the Mormon church. I've been here 30 years. All three of my girls went from preschool to high school in Lyons, graduated. I worked for the county. I've worked for the county an equal amount of times. When I moved to Lyons, I started working at the county. Worked in child protection for years, and then during the flood, started volunteering my time and that turned into a job. And now I'm a fully certified emergency manager, and I still work for the county. Recently moved out of human services into the recovery office. So I've always had my toe in recovery, but did recovery after the flood, but not in my job. So I oversee all the sheltering for the county. All the volunteer engagement, donation management, and voluntary assistance centers and disaster assistance centers. And then I also oversee the mass fatality plan. So, and I did the planning for human services and my that business now. Love emergency management. I've also deployed in Alaska numerous times, also Oklahoma. So there's an interstate agreement, essentially, we can borrow from each other. So I've gone primarily to Alaska to lend a hand a lot of times. So passionate about gardening. I founded the garden club in Lyons, was president of the garden club for years, was in the PTO, gymnastics. Yeah, all those things, that young moms always get involved in, so. Love being a grandma of 3 now, so my oldest and my youngest are both married and have kids, and my middle is in medical school, so. She just took her first medical board today. Wow, she's a disaster.
Alright.
So that's a little about me.
Great, thank you, welcome. Any questions for Jocelyn before we move to our consent agenda? No, glad to have you.
Thanks.
Let's move on to the next item, which would be consent agenda, which includes 2 dates, March 9th and May 11th. Minutes. I think because there are different members present on both those, we'll do them separately for voting.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, so first we'll talk about March 9 minutes. If there's any edits that need to take place or anything that was mischaracterized in those minutes, now would be the time to bring it up. Otherwise, we can vote to approve them and someone can second. Or someone can motion, someone can second.
I move for approval of these minutes. I did make a suggestion just for to correct a slight error in because it had attributed a comment about mitigating split rail fences to clad them. That actually was a comment made by trustee Williams. So I'll submit that.
Oh, okay.
It's just in a rod, it's not a.
Sure.
So I move to approve the minutes as adjusted.
I'm happy to second that.
I think that'd be best since you were
Yep.
there.
Yeah. All right, and we'll go ahead and vote and feel free to abstain by not voting. If you weren't present, that's fine too. So 2 votes for approval and 2 votes for abstention. Hi,
No.
how's it going?
Good.
Perfect. Don't worry, still hold an iPad, we're good. You still do that, yeah. Okay, we'll do item 3.2, May 11th, PCDC minutes. If there are any notes of revisions or anything that should be added or included, now will be the time to bring it up. I wasn't here for this. Looks like we swore in Commissioner Matthews. Yes. Sorry, I missed it.
I'll move for approval.
Well, seconds.
Very good. Nope, there it is. All right, we have 2 votes to approve and 2 votes for abstention. Were you here on the 11th? Hold on. Yes. Did you have a chance to look at the meeting minutes for the 11th? No. That's okay. 3 abstentions and 2 votes for yes. That'll work. Okay. We're moving right along. Next would be general business. That would be nominations. Item number 5.1, nomination and election of officers for chair and vice chair. I am relatively unfamiliar with the process for doing this. Does anyone have any guidance?
I think that really the process is at your discretion, right? So I've seen folks just kind of either nominate someone else, could indicate your willingness to serve. You could do it by consensus. You could do kind of a formal, we could do vote on names. So I think it's really at your discretion how you choose to sort this.
Okay.
At least is that kind of how you've done it in
Yeah,
the past?
self-nominate or nominate someone
Mhm.
else.
Comment or- I don't know if I'd call it a nomination. I'm happy to make it, but I sure would appreciate you staying in the position at least for a while since you have the tenure. So the most recent.
Sure.
I'll second that.
Okay, I'd be willing to do it. I kind of talked previously with previous Commissioner Emeritus Schwartz. But that would be a good strategy. So if you guys like that idea, but it's also up for discussion too. If any of those bills call, certainly. So.
I'll just chime in. Typically, we do these kind of the first meeting in January. So I think this round, a vote essentially would probably start for about 6 months. So if, just if that kind of sways the decision one way or the other. I'll
Sure,
figure that
and
out.
technically my service window for the commission is up in October anyway, so we probably have a discussion around that point, around reapplying and how that works, so.
Okay.
Um, and then as far as the vice chair position goes, maybe we can vote on both at the same time, if you guys are open to that.
Yep.
I think it's a really good position for somebody who is curious about being chair and wants to kind of try it out, and if and when the chair can't be present, they run the meeting, get a couple rounds of practice in, just to kind of see what that feels like. And I don't feel like I'm in a position as chair to, or as, you know, proposed chair to nominate someone to be vice chair, so if someone wanted to self-nominate, that would be incredible.
I'll nominate Doug. I had a chance to watch him chair the task force and did very good job.
Okay. The IGA task force.
Good management skills.
And we made it through it in one piece, and I would, but also experience here would be great if somebody else wants to do it.
I'm pregnant, so I don't.
That's fair, I can't tell that. I got center in my finger. Okay, fair enough.
Yes.
Yeah, I would just add, and it's up to you all how you want to do it, but typically, at least Commissioner Evers and I had kind of worked with Lisa to co-design the agendas. So we did it pretty quickly, efficiently, whether you schedule 30 minutes or something, but just wanted to
Good point, the time commitment for that, it's basically showing up for meetings like we do as the commissioner, and then, after the meetings, we would stick around for an extra 15 or 20 minutes and chat with the town planner to kind of come up with next time's agenda. There might be a couple of emails back and forth with time meetings, but it's not a very heavy time commitment.
Yeah.
Thanks for pointing that out.
Unless you'd
No,
like to do
I'm
it,
brand new.
sounds like you have a few things I
Yeah.
can tell you.
Okay. Then I will motion to, accept the proposed nomination for me to be chair and for trustee Matthews. Yes, to be vice chair, for the remainder of the term.
And I second.
So all in favor, please vote on your little dongle to the right of your seat. And we'll do the great reveal. Okay, we voted.
Congratulations, everybody.
Thank you for hanging out while we stumbled through that. It's always funny.
It's always a little awkward.
It's always a little
It
awkward.
is always a
Yeah,
little
if it weren't, that'd be weird. Let's move on to item number 6, audience business. I do see one audience member. Would you like to bring something forward for audience business?
All right, well, since I'm here, my name is Tanya Dante, I live at 623 First Avenue. I just want to commend you all for stepping up to serve in this way. I know that you're here twice a month. Thank you to Commissioner Fankhauser for being sworn in. Thank you for Commissioner Matthews and Commissioner Evers for accepting this leadership position. I noticed there are a couple of empty spots here. I'm just here to observe and learn and ponder my future. So we might see you again, but today I'm just here to learn.
Absolutely. And you know, since there are a couple of extra chairs on the end of the table, if you'd like to join us so you can see the TV better, that might be nice. And
It'll be great for taking notes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
feel free to make yourself comfortable. Is there any other audience business from anyone online? I don't see any other members.
No.
Okay, well, soon not. With that, let's begin the public hearing, item number 7. And I will ask for a staff report under the meetings.
Sure thing. Thank you very much. So the first item for you up tonight is a code amendment to amend a certain provision of our municipal code. I'll pull this up here real quick. We're doing this on a little bit of an elevated, escalated time frame, partly to accommodate my summer vacation schedule, and then partly just to signal to an applicant, should the board agree that they are motivated to kind of continue to make our code a little more development, a little easier to navigate. So we're going to go through this, but it's really a targeted code amendment to one section of our subdivision code related to minor subdivisions. So again, subdivisions, you don't see these very often from time to time though, however, so we have an entire chapter 17 that regulates the division of land, essentially kind of the creation of lots, relocation of property lines. Through this process, we can establish easements, rights of way, etc. The table on the slide shows the various different types of subdivision processes we have. Some are administrative, which means staff can work with the applicant and review and approve these administratively without public hearings. And then some require public hearings. You'll see the minor subdivision process does require public hearing in front of the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees prior to approval. The major subdivision process, however, requires 3 distinct processes: a sketch plan, which has its own series of hearings, preliminary plat, and then a final plat. So potentially an applicant has to go through that process 3 different times. I think we would probably be well served as a community to revisit the major subdivision process at some point and decide collectively if we think these 3 layers are continue to be appropriate. But we're not here to do that tonight, but certainly open to feedback on that. Generally, these are reserved for kind of your larger projects where we have infrastructure and drainage improvements and lots and streets, right? Like I think that allows us to kind of build over time and work with an applicant to develop this concept with a lot of public input. And then we have a few other, I think, less substantive ones. Again, some still require public hearings and then some are administrative. So the draft ordinance in front of you, or in the packet, again, just relates to the minor subdivision of land. And this is really the types of properties that are eligible to be reviewed as a minor instead of a major, right? So this would say these now could just have 1 round of public hearings instead of 3. And so the impetus for this is we are working with a property owner that is zoned land unit development, and they at some point may apply, but that's kind of how this arrived, right? So just feedback from an owner of property that's on PUD. So this would propose to strike the limitation that they're just blatantly not eligible for this process. They still have to comply with all the other zoning standards. The submittal requirements are all the same. It still would require public hearing. So that would be kind of the primary purpose of this. However, we're also proposing to strike 0.4. It's kind of tying back to a previous date way back when that would render this ineligible if they had done this before. Staff doesn't see a purpose for this to retain this date. I don't know why it was put in here and what changed in 1999. So those would be kind of the 2 primary changes as a result of this ordinance. Finally, we're just proposing to strike the number of copies as a cleanup. It still does require a submittal and meeting all the materials. We're just not going to make them print 25 copies in paper, which practically we haven't done anyway. And so happy to take any questions on this. Again, relatively simple, but don't want to move through it any faster than you're ready.
Okay, questions for staff?
You go back one.
Sorry, to this one?
No, what was strict?
Oh, sorry, this one? Sorry.
Yeah, that.
Okay.
I guess the one question, like it seems clear to me, but the one question is what's the downside? Like, why would what's the downside to the plan unit development staying on there? Or why would somebody have put that on there to start with? I couldn't.
No, that's a great question. I don't know the legislative intent from when this code was first written, why a PUD was in there. I think, PUDs, I think, are kind of a custom zoning. And so maybe there was an assumption that either that, first approval. Yeah, I'm really speculating. I don't know the legislative intent to that, so I'm just guessing honestly. Or are you gonna suggesting I add something?
I just want to make sure we're the PCDC too, because we're all in some new roles, that the Board of Trustees had a first reading on this.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. And so asked for a recommendation from PCDC before it comes back for a final.
Yeah, the code requires a review and recommendation from PCDC, but again, because of my summer schedule, we kind of swapped to the first reading. Board had generally no questions or concerns on first reading. However, their public hearing is going to be next week.
Right.
Right.
So the materials submitted for a minor are different than materials submitted for a major?
They potentially are less technical, again, but I think we have some discretion in there. They are less technical, but I think, again, the scope of a minor subdivision is it doesn't create more than 3 lots, things like that. So I think the need for technical drawings is much more limited, right? So I think, again, really the purposes of this, like, the fact that the property is zoned PUD, in staff's opinion, shouldn't render it ineligible for that process.
Seems reasonable.
Okay, any other questions for staff? This one seems kind of straightforward, but there's some mysterious history to the legislation.
It's really, part of the challenge in our municipal code history is, in 2014, we basically kind of re-adopted our entire municipal code, and it kind of renumbered and recategorized it, but it was this like blanket, like, code adoption, and so it's really hard to tell, like, especially in like a larger code. This wasn't, from what I could tell, like a targeted amendment that added this, so I think that's where it's tricky. Like, sometimes you can go back and find in the minutes, like, we added this for this reason. I wasn't able to identify it here.
Well, assuming there's no other questions for staff, and we can always be a little informal and go back to staff questions if we.
Sure, certainly.
I'll move for approval of resolution 2026-4.
I think we're ready for that. We do need to check real quick to see if there's any public comment prior to moving a motion, but unless you have public comment, no. I think we would be ready for a motion. Motion to approve is on the table. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Now we can discuss amongst ourselves, the merit. So if anyone has any thoughts about voting one way or another, now is the time to share it.
I think these points are consistent with the direction over the last at least few years to reduce unnecessary administrative actions, and or requirements for applicants that really are not essential, in order to save staff time, make things move along more rapidly. And unless there's a need for them, because if you don't have those points in there, something bad could happen. But these revisions, at least to me, there's extremely low risk of anything really bad happening as a result of these changes.
Okay. Well, if there's no other discussion, I think we are ready to vote on the motion to approve the resolution as written. So go ahead and use your toggle switch to the right. We have a unanimous vote in approval. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. That's the end of the public hearing, is that correct?
Yeah, the next one's not a public hearing, but I did leave it on as general business because I wanted us to be able to like actually capture the minutes and the record for this discussion, since ultimately it could result in an amendment to our comprehensive plan. So
Right.
it's gonna be probably a little more direct than a workshop, but you're not voting or anything like that. But it isn't, I haven't kind of demoted this to a workshop level because I would like this formally reflected in the record.
Perfect. Well, let's do it. Discussion on strategic growth element, and it's your show, I assume.
Yeah, so thank you very much. I will
That's what I'm doing.
share my screen again. So back up a little bit for the.
And you went over this same material with the board in your workshop as well, right?
That's,
Just to be
yep,
clear.
yes, exactly. So there it is. And yeah, and we'll certainly lean on trustee Schwartz for this conversation as we dive in. So I'm just gonna do a little bit of an intro, but you're right, Commissioner Matthews, this was presented and chatted about with our board at their last meeting on June 1st, and they provided the direction I needed to kind of keep this moving, which the next step is to come to you, since it is a component in our comprehensive plan. So Back in 2024, the state legislature passed SB 24-174, which is a land use bill related to housing needs assessment, strategic growth, things like that. And, you know, staff kind of use this legislation as multi-layered effort, which is intended to build over time. So there's kind of three major components. And then within those major components, there's a lot of little subcomponents and work we have to do. So the first one was a housing needs assessment. We're going to talk about that in a minute. The second is the water supply and strategic growth element in comprehensive plans. That's where we are right now. We are, the legislation requires we complete this work by the end of this year. And then finally, what we'll build on that is our housing action plan. And we have till the end of 2028. We don't have to wait that long, but that's when the legislation requires that we do that. And essentially then that kind of connects the needs assessment with how we'd like to strategically accommodate that and our water supply into kind of those next action steps that we're going to take. So that's just kind of a high level of the layers of this bill. So in terms of the regional housing needs assessment, the legislation said that local governments could either kind of update their own with a compliant one that met this new bill, or sign on to a regional one. So you probably remember, some of you were here when we did our local, what do they call that? I'm sorry, the housing. Well, they call that our local one. Sorry,
It's very particular how it should be worded.
I'm missing the name of ours. It will come back to me. We did one with DOLA funded grant money in, I believe, 2023, and a lot of communities did, and the legislation changed. So a lot of those housing plans that communities did a number of years ago did not meet the state bill. So we could have adopted, we could have updated that, but our board elected instead to sign on to the DRCOG Regional Housing Needs Assessment, which includes data for Lyons. And so our board, when they adopted and signed on to that one, there was a window last summer from July to September where local governments could say, we're going to adopt that as our own. When they did that, the resolution's in your packet, but our board identified, some inconsistencies with the data, some inconsistencies with some of our local policies, things like that, but they still agreed to sign on. So staff has continued to meet with DRCOG, and the latest, kind of conversation we had with them in advance of this next point of work, because it directly ties back to that housing needs assessment, is that, I think they agree that local data could be more accurate than the HUD and census data that they used. However, I think they, find that the scope and scale of the housing need in Lyons is probably unlikely to change to a large degree. So the housing needs assessment for Lyons indicates that, and this is kind of how they framed it, which I think is a little different than how maybe we previously thought about this. Given our current housing market, at least 87 households in Lyons are not served by the local market for housing, right? So that's kind of, their estimate is 87 housing households, their housing need can't be met with the local market, right? So either their income is lower than what the market can serve. So again, the way they came up with that number, I think we all agree could be more refined, but I think it's unlikely that, we probably would find that that's vastly different than maybe what we see with our workforce housing and our continued need for affordable housing. So, just kind of keep that in mind as we're thinking through this next step, that there will be some expectation that as we advance this forward, that we do need to connect back to this RHNA as we're thinking about our housing need and the households that live in Lyons and what would be best to help meet their needs. Any questions on that before we move ahead?
You said it was 87
Households.
not 87 individuals.
No, it's households. Yep. Yeah. All right. So this next component, again, kind of where we are now, is the strategic growth element that we need to include in our comprehensive plan. So that strategic growth element is comprised of kind of three different elements. So the first is a description of existing and potential policies that we have in our comp plan and tools to promote strategic growth and prevent sprawl. So staff met with DOLA, we kind of showed them what we have in our comp plan, and I firmly agree. I think our current comp plan includes a lot of this today. So to the degree we would like to lean on what we have, I don't think we need to revisit all of our policies and goals that we have, and I'm going to pull that up here in a little bit. So I think we're okay. If we identify that, I mean, we'd like to amend, we certainly can, but I think we're sitting in a pretty good position with point number one. The next step, though, 2 and 3, we do need to do, and the second is an analysis of vacant and underutilized sites and the use of those sites for the development of housing. We're going to talk a little bit more about that here in another slide. And finally, looking a little bit beyond our borders, so the analysis of underdeveloped or undeveloped sites that are not adjacent to developed land and the use of those sites for housing. So those, we're going to kind of go into depth on each of these. So again, existing policies and tools, you know, I've gone through our comprehensive plan. I've identified, some were included in your staff report, numerous policies, I think, that support targeted infill, diversification of housing. We have strategic annexation policies. I think we've really done a good job of identifying where it's appropriate to annex, where we don't think is appropriate to annex. And so I'm really recommending, I think, that we lean on that work. I have started a spreadsheet that I can pull up if you would like to dive into more of those policies and look, but over time, I think we're going to be tracking that. And then we can do an addendum to our comprehensive plan that really kind of points back to those policies that we have. So next, so this is kind of where I think we are going to really need to focus and do some work. So I presented this structure to DOLA. I think they thought it might be a good approach for Alliance. We certainly don't have to take this approach. Again, the board talked about this on the 1st of June, and I think they collectively were comfortable with kind of moving this concept forward to you all next to refine. So again, analysis of vacant and underutilized sites. So the goal of that is to reduce sprawl, support strategic infill. The legislation says that those sites need to be near transit and job centers. It's a little questionable for how that works in Alliance. However, they said the legislation still applies, right? So they suggested kind of this corridor approach, right? Like, where are the properties that we would really like to focus and could facilitate change? So we suggested the concept of like a strategic growth overlay that reflects kind of the goals and policies we already have in our comp plan. And I think just kind of makes it really clear to everybody that like this is the area that potentially could change as a result of this work. We do not have to do, unless we choose to, every site that's in here an analysis. So what I suggested to DOLA and included in your packet that the board is going to look at on the 15th. So a few examples, right? Like we have the site plan work that we did here at Hall, right? So that showed a number of housing units. So that would be kind of one example of what that could look like. Another example of what could look like is, shoot, I can't get the cursor, but out on the eastern corridor, the annexed property that is owned by TiVo, that was zoned R3. So we have some concept site plans for the developer of what that R3 housing could look like. So that's a you know, kind of another example. And then I think we should probably identify kind of a third site, you know, kind of somewhere and do some work around what that could look like, whether it's an unannexed property, whether it's an additional site in town. I don't think we, so I'm really looking for feedback on that. And then ultimately, again, kind of adopt this overlay as an addendum to our comp plan with a few of these examples, connecting back to our goals and policies. So, you know, I think that's the structure that we're proposing. In terms of this overlay map, this is just this is not intended to be parcel specific. I know that there's some properties in here that are not appropriate for development, floodplain, things like that. But I did want to get feedback from PCDC with, you know, Trustee Schwartz's input on this slide here. You know, obviously tightening it and removing properties that are owned by the town or within the floodplain, but generally, does this kind of align with either your understanding of the comp plan and where you think the town would like to focus for some of these policies? So I'd really like your feedback at this point. And I kind of jumped ahead. I guess I'm gonna look to you if there's anything else you want to add at this point.
The only things I would add is just at a high level, right? This isn't committing us to anything. It's just a plan. And I think it's really just kind of repackaging work we've already done. In the comp plan, and various other plans with Director Kaplan and the water part. It's just repackaging a lot of things that we already have. So it's not committing us to anything. I think it's just, you know, it is a compliance thing. And I think it's also an opportunity for us to really understand in such a landlocked little town, where are the real opportunities? And hopefully it can be a opportunity to just share that more widely with the community about what's on the table, what's not.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that's great. I think that's a really key point. I want to reiterate, this legislation does not require the town to actually issue building permits for new housing. It requires us to think about where it should go and what actions and policies we should have so that, you know, we're at least guiding that. But nowhere will we be kind of penalized if new units aren't built as a result of this work.
So,
I mean, it's like the last thing I'll say for now is, I think they're trying to encourage a smart growth platform that is around transit, which I know doesn't fully apply for us, but you know, think about their setting policy for the whole state. So it's just, yeah. How is the state gonna grow with limited water and limited land throughout the state?
Yeah,
the proposed areas on here from your report, are those staff's interpretation of meeting the requirements of this legislation, or is that they want to see specific examples?
This
Can you kind
is-
of walk me through that?
yeah, no, I think that's a great next question. So this is kind of staff's interpretation after reviewing our comprehensive plan and the policies we have in the comprehensive plan. Recognizing that the legislation requires us to analyze and identify underutilized and vacant sites.
Yeah, those three things.
And our comp plan calls for some strategic infill and redevelopment of these types of sites. This was my best attempt to kind of marry the legislation to our comprehensive plan, recognizing there are certainly properties either not going to be in here that we could add, or again, kind of an overlay that is a little bit flexible. One thing that's not in this black line is, and I think we should include like a little bit of an asterisk in the strategic growth overlay, even if we don't include the line on the map, is that our comprehensive plan does call for duplexes, triplexes, some degree of multifamily in our existing neighborhoods that could change over time. So I don't necessarily think we could expand that if you all would like to. But I think to some degree that policy is also supportive too, but I think in terms of vacant and infill, it's more of these kind of corridor areas.
Yeah, so the three bullet points from the legislation are, one of them is really infill and adjacent development, right?
Mhm.
And the other one would be sort of like satellite development.
Yeah. So this slide here is really, I think, kind of, yeah, well, we'll go to the adjacent here in a minute. So I think for this slide, I just am kind of thinking more around the like vacant and underutilized kind of within the, you know, bounds of our community and built environment today.
What I saw, having not heard you go.
Yeah,
through the slides,
yeah.
right, which is really great. To me, the way, you didn't use this word, but I think it makes sense. The overlay is really, it feels like a way to sort of tighten the magnification of creative out of the box thinking. We've already exhausted this idea that we have land that doesn't exist, but this seems to be a way to say, look, in this pretty narrow corridor, are there creative things that we're not thinking today? Are there properties being used by one particular use that, if transformed by magic wand, could be better? And it felt like what you were saying is, this is bringing a tighter magnifying glass on a more specific
Yes.
area or specific 2 or 3 or 5 properties or whatever that might be in there.
I think that's a good way of saying it, because I think that the thing I don't wanna revisit unless you all would like to, is, you know, that entire red line is our future land use map, right? And I know, I don't think our comprehensive plan indicates we're gonna grow into all these areas, right? And so I think this is just like a little bit of a guide for our local residents, for potential developers, for our elected officials to say, like, yes, well, that's our future land use map. This is kind of the area where we intend to concentrate these goals and policies first.
Yeah, just strikes me that the overall planning process is complicated by the fact that you have state legislature,
Yeah.
DOLA overlay on that,
Yep.
which may add a little bit of requirement in that
Mhm.
process. with Dr. Cog, holding some purse strings and policies and that sort of thing as well. Plus the history of Lions, struggling with, growth and with, annexation and, various housing, concepts in the past.
Mhm.
So that creates a fairly complex
Yeah, Yes.
basic environment.
yes.
And I think incidentally, I think you did a masterful job writing the materials.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate
Describing
that.
it. Because it's very fact-based. It's not, there aren't big, ambiguous, suggestions that may, cause flare-ups of reaction.
Really trying not to have this, like, I'm really trying not to open the box of
Right.
these bad conversations.
But that's a fact, and that'll be difficult.
I know.
But I think you've done a
Thank you.
remarkable job in, getting that start. Very fact-based, a clear description of the complexity and the objectives of each of the various elements that are involved. And I think continuing that mode of public collaboration and public involvement will be the best basis that we can have. Because I think it's respectful of, for the most part, the perspective that we've heard from the public. It's not, there's no like seeming attempt to do something like this or that. It's just fact-based, clear, what requirements are moving forward, which I think will really be very helpful.
It does seem like there's some intention in circling the business district, but leaving out the adjacent neighborhoods
I really wanted feedback on that.
that are in the same grid.
To some degree, I've heard some mixed opinions about the desire to actually allow duplexes and triplexes in our single family neighborhoods, right? So I think that's where I think this public engagement, obviously they're not allowed today. We'd have to go through a zoning process, right? And we do engagement around that. But I think I started a little bit more conservative, hoping to get feedback if you all would like to more explicitly amend that line to capture that in the comp plan, then, because it is in the comp plan.
Well, the only thing that gives me pause is past conversations we've had we've had a lot of different planners before your time. And we've had a lot, the whole time I've been on the planning commission, there's been a housing crisis in the state of Colorado. So housing has always been discussed and beat around and pushed and prodded and pulled. And one thing that's fascinating that may or may not become an instrument we would use would be minimum lot size. And that would be one where you would want to capture our, our urban adjacent neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So that's the only problem with that growth overlay of that. And I think the duplex, triplex zoning is probably too heavy for Lions. I don't think that.
To revisit minimum lot sizes.
The minimum lot size seems like something that would put power in the hands of people who are already on their properties in a way that might be easier to stomach town than say different zoning. Just a thought.
No, I think that's absolutely something we should talk about. I don't recall that our comp plan includes a policy around that.
This conversation had.
Okay.
Comp plan.
Okay, so that might be something, again, that I do want this work to acknowledge those policies in our existing neighborhoods, and I like the addition of that. And I think that's something we can certainly talk about more and with the public.
And that hasn't been talked with the public.
I don't think so.
The other one that came to mind, just reviewing that, and thinking about the adjacent neighborhoods, is the one that has been talked about with the public is the deed restricted buyout properties that are, if the legislation asks us to analyze vacant lots that are adjacent to development, it's hard to ignore those lots.
Yes, but I feel pretty strongly that the fact that we have both the FEMA and the HUD deed restrictions on those properties would render them distinctly different, even though they are vacant. Unless you all would like to analyze those, I think we could, most of them are in the floodplain. I think the town collectively would be on pretty solid footing to say we didn't look at those for these reasons and we did these instead.
And isn't there a review coming up?
Potentially.
Through the Parks and Recs a little bit more around that, around those properties and.
I think the PRC is talking about potentially revisiting Dr. Bot plan. So if you all would
Yeah.
like-
Opening up Pandora's box,
Starting.
a very hot Pandora's box. Yeah.
I would take your direction if you think we should go there, but I don't think the legislation would require that we have to, given the deep restrictions
Oh,
on
no,
it.
that's fine.
Oh.
I just was hoping that we didn't shut the door on that due to a lively conversation that maybe we should have again in the future.
I think that the board is interested in revisiting Dr. Bot plan, and I think through that process, we'll probably be able to have kind of a more focused conversation on the future of those properties.
Great.
The goal of the minimum lot size, can you give me more?
Well, yeah, so I forget what our number is right now. I want to say like 5,000 or 8,000.
Depends on which one, but yeah.
Yeah, it comes to mind. And there's different best practices in different parts of the country for what minimum lot sizes can or should be. And lowering those standards might allow for some people who have double lots or almost double lots to be able to sell off half of their property basically and have it be developed by somebody else.
Alternatively, and I can't remember the numbers, but I actually ran the math, I ran the GIS lot sizes in our R1 zone properties. And I do not recall, I know I said this number out loud to the board at some point, it's a significant number of our existing lots that are non-conforming in terms of lot size. So then I think to some degree, the question becomes, if those lots are fine today as they exist, is it not okay if people create lots of those same sizes, right? So I think there's, multiple reasons why you could look at that conversation.
Exactly. You would look at what your current lots are
Yeah.
at and then make that the number and
Yeah.
that might free up lots that are underutilized.
Yeah.
As the letter of legislation suggests.
Just so, to give yourself a mental picture, if you've ever driven into Longmont, what's it, the road between, that goes past the high school. the-
Through hiking, maybe?
not, well, now if you go down,
Is this the new urbanist development? Can't remember.
yeah,
Okay.
where the industrial area with the high school across the street, and then there's a relatively new development from there. I think that's 63rd Street,
Prospect?
not
Oh,
Prospect.
okay.
No, it's a fairly new development, and in fact, it's still being worked on. But you can see the lot sizes there are not what you're accustomed to seeing going around, Lyons or other places. And you can see how they would be able to, incorporate a lot more in that fairly vast, area. You can see how they could incorporate more units. Fairly easily, and that would be a mechanism for allowing for growth in population with less space available.
But you have to factor wildfire recommendations on space between houses in an area like ours where we're highly susceptible to wildfire versus the city of Longmont. So it's susceptible.
I'm not recommending, just trying to.
Yeah.
If you wanted to get a visual impact of what that would be. Plus. We don't have in line, we don't have any vast areas like that.
Right.
Yeah.
We have like, maybe a, 10, what's now 10 lots could become 12 lots type of situation. And so, there could be impacts, but comparatively small. Now, I'm not recommending one way or the other, I'm just saying that, that what lot size. I believe the current lot size was 7,500.
I want to say 7,000. I can check
That
it.
sounds right.
And, I think the, some other towns have recommended like 5,000. That's kind of the range, and to me, having language in the planning of the next steps of this process, to me, should allow for the addition of additional concepts or additional strategies. With, that would be each time provided some type of public engagement,
Mhm.
so that it's not like you have to get everything into the original plan. And, with people thinking, well, this is all gonna happen exactly like this, and it's gonna happen right away. And, we're not gonna have any say over what happens next. Whereas if it's a little more incremental with the inclusion of public engagement at steps along the way.
I have a few targeted questions. Is that okay?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
This Matt first. And if you're gonna answer this later, don't.
Oh, you're good.
worry about
Go
it.
ahead.
I'm curious about how much of that area is actually developable.
So,
It'd
I
be
think,
interesting to see a map of the negative, positive space of what can be done, what can't.
so I think that's my next step. I agree with you. I think that's kind of some of the questions I'd like to see. So if I guess before we go there,
Yeah.
like, are there any areas that you would like to kind of extend this or remove kind of from this general area, knowing we're gonna kind of refine it collectively with a little more detail?
Were there any like debatable areas for you where you're like, oh, maybe this should be included?
You know, I mean, you could kind of go up around to like Planet Bluegrass, like, I don't know what the future of Planet Bluegrass might hold, right? So, I mean, I think that comes to mind first for me. I think the other thing that comes to mind are some questions around like, how far east do we go? Do we kind of go all the way out to that red? And then again, same thing with like Lucanen, I think the IGA conversations rendered some consensus that maybe some of Lucanen was okay. I think that would need refined, but again, I think those are the things that are coming to mind for me right away.
One place that comes to my mind is, and I can't tell from here if it's included, which is the up Fifth Avenue to where it turns, and there's that small,
That little general industrial site.
yeah.
I think that's where I think we could use kind of that strategic, we could include it. Or I think we could include like strategic use of an asterisk, right? That's like, there may be other sites, that, that aren't shown that might have these characteristics. So I think we could include it, or I think we could do that too.
And my understanding was the line is basically, we're gonna take a magnifying glass and look within the boundaries. We're not gonna say, hey, anything within this boundary might,
Agree.
this is like. And I hate to talk about specific properties as they may come up, but as you're coming into town. We've got some commercial buildings that are very active, and we've got some other buildings in there that are less active. And I'm not saying,
Mhm.
like, I'm not at all proposing anything, and I think most people know where I stand on sprawl. But I think there's an opportunity to say, forget the practicalities for just a minute and go, if we could change this land from being this building that it currently is, and it could be something done differently in a different way that serves a better, higher purpose for our needs, whether it's housing or economic development, or ideally both, especially along that corridor. Let's put a magnifying glass on it. The chances are the financial realities, the economic realities are gonna prevent us from doing 90% of it, but there might be a couple of areas where we go, maybe a developer, if given a chance, they would say they'd like to change this particular building into something that's more interesting.
And by
And
utilizing.
I understood the line to be, let's take a magnifying into those,
Mhm.
into that general circle and then come back and go, here's a specific property, not a corridor. That we should maybe have a conversation about. Is there any way that this could be something more interesting? A great example was, and I can use this one because it's kind of past. If you look at where, the art gallery and now the new art, center, whatever we want to call it. Is, I remember during the IGA process, Holly Rogan and I were walking around and we were just brainstorming like, if money were no object, what, like, are there some land and buildings that could be redone? And if you look at that and think, okay, if that were an empty lot, could you make something that was more economically feasible and maybe add some apartments on the top? In a way that's in keeping with the look and the feel and the traffic and the water and fire and all the other things. That was an example where it's like, at the time, it was a completely underutilized property when it was Ranger Rick's, right? And now it's gonna be like a really cool heartbeat of the town. But that's an example of where maybe there's other properties that are sitting kind of idle. That some developer may say, if you gave me the option to build something cool here, I could do it. That's,
Yep,
am I
That's,
interpreting?
that's how this is, that's how I intended that to work. So again, we can narrow it or leave it flexible, like, but that's kind of, when I drew that, that was kind of what I was thinking.
And when the staff does the water study, they're doing the water study inside that. That's
So,
why that line is.
no, so the water study will have to be kind of our entire water supply. And then making sure that we're connecting our water supply with ultimately this work. So I think staff is pretty confident that the water supply we have is not, it's capable of meeting the goals in the regional housing needs assessment, right? So I think we still have to send those documents to DOLA, have them double check it, but I think the supply we have, given kind of this modest area, we think we're okay. But it has to be an evaluation of our entire system and supply.
There are some cities that have just said, we don't have any more water.
Yeah.
Like Erie. So I think again, it's like the state's trying to aggregate all of this to understand the bigger problem.
Some cities don't have their own water supply, right? Like they have special districts, right? So I think Lyons is in a good position because we kind of control our own destiny with those decision making. So I think this is more geared toward like all the communities that don't have direct control over their water supply like we do. But we feel pretty good about it. But if it gets off kilter, we'll certainly identify that through this process.
I would say that my initial reaction, just, me being a commission for a little while, being around lines for a little while, this looks like a plan that says we should develop the Eastern Corridor.
Yep, which I think is most of what our plans say.
Which is kind of what, so like, I actually kind of feel like the circle around downtown is sort of there in vain. I don't know, because certainly there'll be infill and there will be potential for development, but I don't think our strategic growth plan is really gonna impact any growth plan for the downtown, but
So I think this is again, the vacant and underutilized, right? So I think to the degree you think, because that's the purpose of this first part.
yeah, but I don't think that we need to light a fire under those vacant lots, do we? Like.
I think feedback if you'd like to.
Well, no, I feel like, why include the downtown if there's not really what would it mean for the downtown to include it in this study, I guess is my question.
To some degree, it was reflecting, I think, policies that exist in our comp plan around, like housing is potentially okay in our downtown, right? If the right project comes to be. So we can.
Re-emphasizing something that's already there in the town, which I guess the Eastern Force.
Well, I'm thinking that what this says to me, almost just by the comparable sizes of the areas, that it's focused on Eastern Corridor, but opportunistic in downtown and along the way.
Yeah, well, I mean, most of that space, like where the red and the purple dot is at the McConnell intersection, so like the middle of the dumbbell,
Mhm.
that's not developable, right? That's all cliffy property.
To some degree, there's some potential there. So, I mean, some of them are not annexed yet, right? Like,
And then right on the other side is mostly floodplain, if I'm right.
so I think that middle portion will certainly get constricted.
So it looks like a dumbbell.
Yeah, I was mostly reflecting the fact that those properties were red by the virtue of drawing this. I think practically, there's a lot of it that's undevelopable.
When I see the gray quarry
Mhm.
in there, is that strategic? Cause it looks like it is.
So the Lucanen property, I did kind of drag that dot down there again, because I think, at least, and again, we all know the IGA didn't get approved, but the draft maps associated with the IGA did contemplate some degree of development. So whether or not that needs to be in this map or kind of that next future map, I definitely would like feedback on that.
I mean, didn't the property owner indicate they were interested in discussing annexation at one point in time?
I believe over time they have indicated that. I know, it's not all developable certainly, but I think, if we have, and I think part of this probably transitions a little bit to this, right? So some of it, I guess, is if you want to consider that undeveloped land or underdeveloped land. I mean, it's kind of a brownfield site, right? So, and it's within our planning area. The next phase, like the kind of the paired to this is, again, making sure that we're looking kind of, we're being strategic to prevent sprawl, but also to meet our housing need. Where are these areas that we potentially want to grow?
Like you said, because it's the intent is to prevent sprawl.
I know, it's both, right? Like they're trying to do
So a little
both.
sprawly area and lines develop over and over and over again.
That second bullet point, to me, that's the root of all of this,
Yeah,
is you narrow map and then you do a legitimate evaluation of infrastructure, viability, economic viability, and almost everything we looked at in the IGA is zero, the economic viability, but you never know, maybe somebody's got a creative way to build on an old quarry. So.
and to some degree, the legislation says we have to look at these certain lands that are, like, we have to through the process. It might not mean we leave it in there at the end, but the legislation requires we look at it. Sorry, go ahead, Molly.
So just, I think the thing that tied in for me is how is the state gonna grow with a low water supply, that
Mhm.
question, so really it's just trying to make us identify. Where there could be sprawl or development. To analyze the vacancies and then see how that limits us with water.
Yeah,
That's a water share study, not a water use study.
it's a water supply study.
Water supply study, meaning are we looking at shares per property or are we looking at property uses?
We're looking at kind of all of that as well as what we have in terms of like, what is our overall capacity? What's our treatment capacity? What's the cost to meet, like, like it's,
Well, not to like go back to something we
yeah, no, you're good.
probably finished, but the one part of the lot size thing that never gets talked about, because it's not that fun, is anything that's not building is typically fescue, that's, water with
Typically
drinking, fescue, grass. And so you just dump drinking water into, 10-foot, 5-foot and 50-foot setbacks. So there is a case to be made that water use is impacted by infill differently than it is with, anyway. I would just be interested in knowing if the water study has any like granular requirements, or is it really just a water share study?
I am not lead on that part. Aaron is kind of overseeing that, and right now it's really just, again, sending what we have to DOLA to just see are we good? What do we want to do extra? What do we need to do? We will have to bring these two together, and I think that's an interesting point. And then, to Commissioner Fankhauser's point too, right? Like, the inverse, what are the risks associated with some of these types of developments too? I think, to the degree we can mitigate them, that's great, but I think that's kind of the point of all of this.
So one point, there'll kind of be a discussion of. What is like responsible with the water supply that we have.
Mhm.
Okay, and then how does that match with our priorities? Yeah, okay, great.
And I think to trustee Schwartz's point, I think we're already pretty good, we're in a pretty good position on these two issues. Comparatively with some of our neighboring rapidly growing communities. So not that we can't continue to do the work, but I don't think the legislation was targeting lands with this particular element.
It's a difficult puzzle.
Yeah.
Is this gonna consume staff's time?
We talked to the board about that. This proposal, DOLA has laid out a couple different paths to get there. This meets the like acceptable proposal. They have a few examples of like exceptional. I think if board was very comfortable with compliance.
Yeah.
And so I think given that we don't need to do specific more analyzing than kind of what we've already got, I'm comfortable. If we did, I was gonna ask for grant money. But I think the board is directed just like compliance.
That feels comfortable.
I agree. I don't think we need to do more than that at this time. Because I think we're gonna have to continue to keep doing this with the adjusting. And I think at the end result, I think this makes even if it just makes a roadmap a little more clear for our public and for our development community, I think even at the end of the day, that's a really great job. So they don't have to read the whole thing when they see that map.
A little outside our scope, but there was always some discussions around water pressure, because there's some
Yeah.
neighborhoods up a higher
Definitely,
elevation that
yes.
get pressure. So like expanding our water outward, would that affect any of that equation? Have you guys talked about that?
No, I think that's it. We didn't talk about it here, but I think indirectly our code, right, like we have the blue line, you can't build above a certain height. A lot of that's due to water pressure. So because part of this is to evaluate infrastructure viability, to some degree, our comp plan honored that, right? Because it indicates like growing to Apple Valley is expensive and difficult. Going down to South St. Vrain is expensive and difficult, for a lot of those reasons. I think utility expansion into the east corridor is expensive, but feasible, technically feasible. I don't like, that's our technically least challenging area to go, so it's just the cost.
Well, a lot of it's,
Just gravity is going that way.
a lot of it's been done.
What's that?
A lot of it's been done.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like we're starting from scratch out there.
Still a lot of build, but that's where we've been assuming, right? So I think again, my goal was to mirror what we've already done. So again, any properties that you think like before we start working with the boards and commissions, so next steps, I'm happy to kind of refine this map, come back to you. I think that I might appreciate that and because I guess I'm thinking, right, like next map is like a zoom in on this outline.
It's like
right?
actual property.
And then I think like, let's show the floodplain on it, right? Like, let's show some of those hazard areas that we know about. Alternatively, I can kind of add that and go to those other boards and commissions without coming up to you. So I'm not sure how much you all help.
When we say floodplain, you mean floodway?
Both.
Oh.
I mean, both are regulatory. There is risk in the floodplain too, right? So.
Risk everywhere.
So, I mean, I think.
Our PUD, well, actually, it wasn't a PUD, our development that our trustee developed years ago, that was in the floodplain
Yes.
partially. So like,
Yes.
I don't think it's a real, I don't know. I hesitate to like put it out there as like a layer on these maps to like influence people sneaking around properties, but the floodway, absolutely, right?
Okay,
I don't know, just
Yeah.
my personal Neil's not commissioner's opinion about that is I think people get really wrapped around the idea of floodplain, but it's still developable.
I think Lyons is more flexible in the floodplain than most places I've worked. But I think it's partially because we're so constrained by floodplain that I think the impacts
Interesting.
are.
What are you thinking of? Where were you before?
So and I think to some degree, like Louisville Superior, where I spent the most times working, part of it was just their built environment around the rivers. They were able to more intentionally develop like structures in those spaces, but also having lived through the 2013 floods and watching the impacts on some of those, and you all here have too. So I think to some degree, Lyons I think the area that the floodplain impacts the other communities I've worked in is percentage wise so much smaller that I think they've been more comfortable saying we are going to limit things here. And I think they've also had a lot more technical solutions that have removed a lot of the property from the floodplain. So I think through the Mile Flood District and things like that, I think they've also prioritized a lot of infrastructure projects that have removed properties over time to mitigate that risk. Whereas we're just so heavily impacted that we haven't been able to do that
Fair enough.
as much.
It's still potentially developable though.
Hear you, I agree.
An outline of developable properties.
I would probably not feel comfortable not acknowledging it at all.
Oh, of course.
Okay.
What plan should I make sense? I mean, there's
But I
lots of
think there's
stuff.
probably a lot of people in town that don't know the difference
They
between
do
the
not,
two.
no.
Very true. So to your point, like, be careful and make sure it's distinct.
Yeah, to
Okay.
your point.
Yeah, lane and floodway should be designated.
Yeah, okay. Awesome. Any other,
I'd like to see it come back, come back to us before it goes on to the other commission.
I'm fine with that. I think I would like that too, just to make sure I don't get too far ahead of this process too fast, too quickly. And I like the idea of having a double check-in with you all on my next work will be to kind of zoom in on this. And then to also, I need to spend some time looking at the census place designations for the areas outside of our boundaries that we're required to look at. I just haven't had to get a chance to get my arms around that yet. So I hope that's not too controversial, but, so we will,
Sure.
we'll plan on coming back to you all. That we have time, so that's fine.
Did you get what you needed from us then today, at least?
Any questions in your mind through this conversation?
No, I think it's been a great conversation.
Yeah.
Good questions, good. Definitely. You guys should take another look at it before.
I'm very comfortable with that.
And that's still, what did we say? We wanted you to come back to the,
We were thinking it might, so yeah, in terms of next steps, we were thinking it might come back to the board like in September. So again, next steps, I'm gonna come back to you all. To refine this, I'll probably include the spreadsheet of the comp plan policies that I'm leaning on for you all to better see that. And then we'll refine that map and then go to the appropriate boards and commissions that have a kind of have a role in this. So I might come back to you all in September, October, right?
yeah, which is fine.
Just
We
totally
just have to
fine.
get it done by the end of the year.
The legislation says end of the year. I asked Dola, my first question was, who's done this? Can you show me what they did? They said, nobody's done it yet. So then my next question was, are we, like, everybody gonna meet this by the end of the year? They just got the guidance out in March, so I think.
Our PCDC priorities like 3 years ago.
I
I'm
know.
proud to say.
So I'm not, like, I feel like we're on track to make it to the end of the year, but I think we're okay.
They'll probably extend it. It seems like that's something that's likely. to
It's
happen.
entirely likely.
Yeah, this one feels like this one's gonna, I mean, just because the guidance came out so late.
And there's potentially gonna, new governor, just like lots of
It all changed.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of the board conversations. This was great. This was really helpful. It gives me what I need to keep moving this forward and,
Okay.
go from there. Thank you very much.
And before we adjourn, sometimes it's nice to get kind of like I would call it a staff report, but basically like important properties in town that maybe people might be asking us commissioners about. We might have something we could tell people, but it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm happy to do a couple updates. So, the first things that come to mind for me, are 402 Main, that's the foundation on Main Street. So, the board on June 1st approved their use tax, agreement. So to rebate some of the use tax back to the developer for that project. They are, I have no reason to believe they're not moving forward. We continue to meet with that applicant, on a weekly basis. They're just, I think, refining the contract with the builder. They've selected their builder, their building permit's ready to issue. They're just getting their ducks in a row on that one. You have seen Planet Bluegrass has applied for annexation of the small piece of property that's an enclave essentially, as well as a PUD zoning for that former engineering building that they office out of and then that site. So as a reminder, anything that's quasi judicial, which that is, if your neighbor says, hey, we really need to talk, just suggest that they email staff, get up to speed with staff. And that you look forward to hearing their public comments at the hearing. I do want to just show you though, we have developed a new resource on the town website to better respond to public questions that come up on development. So let me share my screen here real quick, just so you all can show that to folks if they want to learn more. Our website's really slow right now. I don't know why. Essentially under community development, current developments. we're posting, you know, just a high level summary of what they are. And then uploading the, kind of pertinent application materials as well as posting any public hearing dates. So if you say you want to learn more, go check out the current developments webpage on the town website. And then I'm also keeping on here, some of the recently approved ones that folks might have interest in.
That's great.
So that's, a new resource for folks.
More work for you. It's not a big deal.
I mean, it's, honestly, it's not, because if they then I can just say, go look at the website, there's gonna be any questions.
Sure, Kristen.
Yeah,
Under the heading of full disclosure, I live in Eagle Canyon.
Okay.
I'm aware that there is discussion
mhm.
going on. I have avoided opening any emails.
Thank you.
related to it. I've not talked to any neighbors about it.
That's
in
great.
any way, shape, or form.
Appreciate that. I'll probably have you make that disclosure when the public hearing comes, just to remind folks that you feel like you are gonna be able to fairly do that. So those are kind of the two big ones, you know, I think 402 Main and then, the Planet Bluegrass site that we're kind of in active conversations with. The board recently created a Sundance task force who has been working really hard and really fast.
Yes.
To propose some changes. So I know I told you last meeting that we're not gonna meet on June 22nd. We are now going to suggest that you will meet on June 22nd. Sorry, Neil. To consider amendments to our short-term rental regulations to develop kind of a custom short-term rental license for the purposes of Sundance. So not sure who your staff liaison for that's gonna be. I'm gonna be out of town, but we will. Does that work for enough of you? Knowing you can meet
Does
remotely?
anyone know they can't be here on the 22nd or can't be remote on the 22nd? We got it on the 22nd.
Okay,
Seems like we probably have a forum then.
okay.
We need four for a forum? Is that
You
right?
just need four.
Okay.
You might be, you might be
I
good.
know, I'm here. I'm here. It's on the calendar.
Is this something new?
Yeah.
Is there an update on the Main Street property, the hotel property?
So they provided an update to Laura a couple of weeks ago. Were you at that meeting?
I
You
was
wanna share?
not.
Okay, so, they are working with an architect to revisit their building plans to get fresh pricing. I think they're considering some changes, which I think potentially would require some re-review. I think they're just looking for updated pricing and check viability.
They're gonna spend a little,
What's that?
so they're gonna spend a little more, I think.
I mean, I think it's.
I'm joking.
Spend a little more to spend a little less.
Yeah.
Value engineering.
Yeah. So we haven't seen the results of what changes may come from that, but they've been asking lots of questions, so,
That's good.
yeah, so it's definitely still something that they're considering. Yeah, any other questions for properties? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Anything else from the board that you think? PCDC?
I can think of,
Okay,
yeah. Yeah, it'd be great to have your feedback on the short term rental thing, cause we're behind as a city, and so, yeah, the task force has been awesome. They're going fast, so.
Short-term rental and service of Sundance, is that?
it is. So first reading ordinance will be on June 15th.
Right.
So you'll see it on, we're gonna do the same thing with subdivision. You'll see it on the 15th. We have some policy questions for you.
Are you modeling the policy around boulders? I mean, they've already passed their policy and they have
Yeah.
pretty restricted policy.
That's what we heard.
The Sundance Task Force actually developed the structure of the ordinance. Staff went through it Friday and today and kind of reworked it consistent with our code. And so we have a number of policy questions that we've raised for the board to answer based on their recommendations. But yeah, I think it's fairly similar to Boulder. It's like, it looks piecemealed, I think, from a number of communities.
Yeah, do you have a question?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I ran into this weekend and I'm just wondering, the Boulder Housing Authority at Moxie and.
Yeah.
In the morning on Saturday, it was, or maybe it was Friday. They were holding just like public comment about, the potential development of Seward.
Yes.
Is there there's only, I think, a few people there. So I'm wondering if we're doing anything to just support that public.
We did, I think, Kim Mitchell, our communications person, did amplify that, but I will suggest she amplify that again. So their BCHA is having public input sessions over the next few weeks on that. So thank you
We're
for
gonna
that.
have a lot of free snacks.
Okay.
So that helps drive
All the college students,
attendance.
yeah.
Yeah,
Bring the children
there's
for
lots of
breakfast.
a lot of uneaten snacks.
Uneaten
It is my
snacks.
part, but
There's only so much you can do.
yeah.
Thank you for that.
We usually motion and second to adjourn, so I'll motion.
I have one last.
Oh, sure, of course.
About just scheduling.
Yep.
So if we're meeting on the 22nd, and then you're out in July, right?
So I will be back on the 13th, but I will not have had time to prepare a packet. So whatever staff is here on the 22nd, I assume they will say you do not have a meeting on the 13th.
Okay.
But I'm gonna be out, so.
So that pushes us then to
So,
August 10th. Am I reading that right? The meeting
July
after-
20.
no, so we would be looking at July 27th. So we are the 2nd and 4th, so I will assume that we'll come back to you on July 27th with the follow-up to this conversation and then anything else that might come up. I doubt the Planet Bluegrass application will be ready for you by then.
Okay. We always have a remote option too.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the day after Rocky Grass.
Oh, fair enough.
Some of us won't be very
Remote is great.
ready for that.
I'll be
Very sharp.
Sure.
Thank you for that.
And
Then.
the same, the one on the 10th is after folks.
Yeah.
Unless staff on the 22nd gives you a different update on this, I will be able to be that night.
And we've been in a mode lately where we have been more or less not having meetings when there's not a public hearing.
Yeah.
Trying to make the best use of our time, but, well, soon that'll kind of be our mode. I think.
Yeah, agreed. I think this comp plan work, I think will probably take a few meetings over the, this next few months, but after that, we don't need to meet to create work for people.
Okay, I motion to adjourn. Would anyone second that one? Second, great. I think we do not have to vote for adjournment. Okay, we're good. We're adjourned.
Thank you,
First down.
everybody.